I know that name. So he has kind of been in the Trump inner circle and given one of the binders of the Epstein binders. Now he's coming out against Trump a little bit. Well, he's probably going to lose his position. President Donald Trump, ranchers who supported you have real concerns with the plan to import Argentine beef to undercut them. The bad actors, isn't that interesting? He just used the word bad actors. I'm using the word bad actors before seeing his tweet. So he and I are thinking the same way. The bad actors. And I don't think they're there by mistake, people. The bad actors are the beef packing cartels. Who is advising you? Question mark. American ranchers are 90% for you. This is absurd. Well, that's right. Who is this guy? Because he's actually making sense. Am I following him? Yes, apparently I'm following him. Who is advising? And that's what we asked ourselves, right? Who is he listening to? And to put out a tweet doubling down and blaming it on the farmers that they don't understand. Oh, I'm sorry. It's you, I'm sorry, Mr. President, that don't understand. This guy, Daniel Horowitz, I like Daniel. He says that the president has it blank backwards. If anything, you be more justified encouraging imports of cattle to build up domestic herds, which desperately need more herds or more heads. What you don't want to do is encourage import of beef. This is the general problem Trump has with understanding tariffs. He goes just as severe, and in some cases more severe, on the raw materials and inputs that are needed to bolster American producers than final products. Whew. That was a very poorly written tweet, as I started the program with, and he should have never written it that way. And he is getting called out on the carpet by some of his own supporters. If he doesn't clean up his act, he's going to go down. He's going to lose midterms. People are not going to be supporting his people like Lindsey Graham and others. They're just going to stay at home. And that's not good for any of us. May God save America. Take care.
conversation we had. She was in her 90s, I think, when I was a little boy, and the last time I saw her was about 9. I remember she told me that story, and she told me uh, about the monuments. A lot of them, how she, as a little girl, after the war, uh, the little girls in the Confederacy went around and collected pennies in their neighborhoods. That's one of the reasons why it took so long to build a lot of these monuments.
Yeah, I understand that as well. That's why most of them were late 1800, very late 1800s and early 1900s. The vast majority were. And of course, it was in some sense response because the northern communities that had sent Union soldiers, I think they actually kicked off the standard monument you see of a soldier, and we're putting those in our courthouse squares. And the Southerners, even though they had been impoverished by the war and were much poorer, were quick to note that and try to duplicate it. By the way, you mentioned the 31st Tennessee. My great great grandfather was in the 41st Tennessee. Unfortunately, he lies buried in an unmarked grave in Mississippi. He died in a Confederate hospital there.
That's unfortunate. My other great great grandfather, William Jehu Maness, fought in the Second Mississippi Regiment as an infantryman. We know where he's buried, but the one in Tennessee, we only have the headstone because I believe he's in an unmarked grave somewhere too. The
Mhm.
We got to take a break here in a second, sir, for commercial, but. One of the things that lays heavy on my heart is having to watch all of these monuments be pulled down, and then be desecrated if they're still around. I mean, they cut up one of the Robert E. Lee statues, I think the one from Charlottesville. But most of these monuments have not been cut up, but they have been put on display in various museums around the nation in very derogatory manners, and that really weighs heavy on my heart because having met one of the kids that collected pennies and talked to her and being part of that history of the nation and our families, uh, it really does impart a sadness in our family when I talk to my aunts and uncles that are still living about how they feel about this. And I think that's probably the predominant feeling from the older generation that is older than me is that they're just really sad to see this because they were part of the rebuilding and the actual long-term reconciliation because that process still goes on today, and they see that this movement has been destructive of that process, and are very upset by it. We got to take a break, sir. When we come back, I think I've got a clip of President Wilson at the dedication for just a minute. We'll be right back with retired General John Scales.
Hello, I'm Brandon House. I want to thank you for all your support at wvwfoundation.com that helps make possible pushing out 24/7 content for free. Without your support, we'd have to put it all behind a paywall. But thanks to you and your support through our foundation, we're able to push it out for free as a broadcast service and broadcast ministry of WVW Foundation. Please consider going there and setting up an automatic monthly contribution, or go there and make an occasional contribution. If you prefer to support us through the mail, you'll find our mailing address there at wvwfoundation.com. You can also call and make your contribution over the phone by calling 901-825-0652. That's 901-825-0652. Again, all these details are available at wvwfoundation.com. Thank you for your support as we try to help people around the world understand the times through the lens of a Christian worldview.
Show you that I am profoundly aware of the solemn significance of the thing that has now taken place. The Daughters of the Confederacy have presented a memorial of their dead to the government of the United States. I hope that you have noted the history of the conception of this idea. It was suggested by a president of the United States who had himself been a distinguished officer in the Union Army. It was authorized by an act of Congress of the United States. The cornerstone of the monuments was laid during the term of a president of the United States, elevated to his high position by the votes of the party, which had chiefly prided itself upon sustaining the war for the Union, and who, while Secretary of War, had given authority to erect it. And now it has fallen to my lot to accept in the name of the great government, which I am privileged for the time to represent, the emblem of a reunited people. I am not so much happy as proud to participate in this capacity on such an occasion. Proud that I should represent such a people. Am I mistaken, ladies and gentlemen, in supposing that nothing of this sort could have occurred in anything but a democracy? The people.
Welcome back to the Rob Maness Show. It's Wednesday, and we're telling some truth about the Reconciliation Memorial, and that was a clip of President Woodrow Wilson at the dedication after its completion, talking about the President of the United States that had actually approved this monument to go into Arlington National Cemetery, and that was President McKinley, who was a Union officer. And most people would be very surprised to know in today's society who thinks that there is great division over this, but there's really not, that it was Union soldiers, including a president of the United States, that insisted that this reconciliation monument, it's a beautiful statue and sculpture, be placed surrounded by Confederate soldiers inside Arlington National Cemetery, where 400,000 American war dead are currently buried, over 400,000 at this point, and we're still putting people in there that have sacrificed and given the last full measure of devotion for this country. My guest today is retired General John Scales, United States Army, former 20th Special Forces Group, has commanded, I think, at all levels in that group, was in command at Special Operations, the Joint Special Operations Command, even commanded a joint task force in Afghanistan after 9/11. And General Scales, thank you for your service, by the way. I was in the Pentagon on 9/11 as an Air Force Joint Staff Major, working inside the NMCC, and I greatly appreciate your service, especially taking that fight to the enemy, which I got the opportunity to do later after I left there and commanded a B-1 squadron.
Well, thank you for yours too. Yeah, actually, I had retired at that time and was called back from retirement to go back to JSOC, and that was it was an honor to be asked, and to do that, I just wish that we had been a little more effective at it.
Me too.
But back to the Confederate monuments. When President McKinley, of course, was the last Union officer to be elected president. There were a series of several, but he was the very last one. And when President Wilson dedicated that memorial, one of the other speakers there was actually the head of the Grand Army of the Republic, elected president of the Grand Army of the Republic, which, for those of you that don't know, the GAR was the equivalent of the United Confederate Veterans. That is, it was a fraternal organization of all Union veterans. And the president of that organization spoke very approvingly. And the reason was that he recognized that his foes, years before, had been brave on the battlefield and were sincere in their beliefs just as much as his soldiers were. And that was the thrust of his remark as well.
What do you know what he thought and other Union soldiers thought about the Confederate soldiers' beliefs? There's a lot of debate about that these days.
Well, I think that they recognized, the Union soldiers felt like, well, they were wrong. The Union was more important than anything.
Mm-hmm.
But they well understood, as people now don't particularly seem to understand, that those soldiers were not fighting for slavery at all. That had a fair amount to do with why the southern states seceded, but they seceded and immediately sent a delegation to Washington to draw up a treaty to ensure peace. However, that delegation was not received, and instead, threats and eventually naval flotillas were dispatched. So I think everyone at that time, just about, well, there are always a small percentage of people that don't get the word, but everyone at that time realized that that Southern soldier, most of whom did not have slaves, or no one on in their family had slaves, they were fighting because they were invaded. Their local governments were going to be overthrown. And in many cases, they had heard about atrocities and outrages that had occurred during the early parts of the war. Now, there's a statement that you often hear, well, most of the Confederate soldiers were conscripted. Probably that number was about 10% of the total. The vast majority were volunteers, and they volunteered for the military, and their thoughts were on protecting their families, their homes, and their communities. And that's what they were fighting for. And the Union soldiers, and there were interactions at the time. There's one very famous one in Gettysburg, where they were asked, the soldiers were asked, well, we're fighting for the rights of our state. What right were they fighting for? The right to leave the Union peacefully because it no longer met their needs in many respects. There's another one down in Atlanta. There's a famous saying, after the war, a Confederate captain was talking to someone who had been on the other side, and the Union officer had said, well, we were attacking at such and such a place, and the artillery fire was extremely accurate and decimated our ranks. And the Confederate soldier smiled. He said, yes, that was my artillery. And you know why it was so accurate? That was my grandfather's plantation, and I knew every inch of that ground. That's why they fought, for their ground.
Yeah, yeah, and the idea about being able to leave matches what the founders wrote about and the framers of the Constitution wrote about the compact. This is what it used to be called, the Compact of the States. And to this day, this is Rob's opinion. To this day, that is not a settled matter, even though 600,000 plus Americans died in the war between the states. It's still not a settled matter. That's why I live not far from President Davis's last home in Gulfport, Mississippi, and just down the road from it. And I've been there several times to walk through and look at this stuff. And there's a presidential library there, so a lot of his primary documents, folks' primary document, are the actual words in a document by the principal that you're talking about. In this case, Jefferson Davis. He says that over and over again. The preponderance of his messages that he actually worked on and wrote and gave in speeches, both on the Senate floor when he was still a U.S. senator and beyond, were about the rights. I don't want to say states' rights because that's a cliche, I think, but the rights of the individual states that had agreed to the contract or the compact to be upheld inside the contract. That was the big problem politically at the political level as to where the secession happened. And it's amazing that if they asked a soldier on the battlefield or close or after it at that battlefield site what they were fighting for, to say, I was fighting for my state's right to leave, that's exactly what that messaging was. A preponderance of it. I mean, there's some statements by, I think, the vice president of the Confederacy that mentioned slavery once in a 5,000 word or so speech. But most of it is about whether the union is more important or whether the states that joined the union were more important. Did I have that right?
Yeah, that Stevens quote. Well, we had a local monument here, and
Hmm.
we were trying to raise money, so we had a press conference about it. Unfortunately, of course, some of the press was of a different opinion, and they called up their favorite friends from the left wing. And
Hmm.
when I was trying to make a statement, one of them was screaming in the microphones only a few feet from me, that particular quote from Alexander Stevens, who, of course, she didn't realize that Stevens himself had very little influence because he and Davis didn't get along. So Stevens was speaking for himself personally anyway.
Yeah.
But you said that uh, the ability of a state to secede, obviously now, was held unconstitutional in 1869 after the war concluded by a Supreme Court, five of whose members had been appointed by Lincoln, and the
Hmm.
person that wrote the opinion was Chief Justice Chase, who had been in the room when the decision was made to attack the Confederacy in late March of 1861. So he had skin in the game, I guess is the best way to say that, to appear that, oh, we're not really being aggressive. This is all those people's fault.
Hmm.
And that was his judgment. But he actually based it not in the Constitution, but in the Articles of Confederation, and on the appearance, by my count, 13 times, of the word perpetual in there.
Hmm.
Well, a good question is, why did the word perpetual appear in the Articles? It appeared in the Articles because the Articles were written at a time when the nascent United States was fighting for freedom from the world superpower at the time, Great Britain. And of
Hmm.
course, one of the ways that you beat a revolution is divide and conquer. So the word perpetual appeared all the time to try to oppose that tactic, it would be said. But
Hmm.
the war ended in 1783. 4 years later, it was decided that the articles were inadequate.
Hmm.
People met in convention in Philadelphia for months to come up with a draft of a new compact, which they call the Constitution of the United States of America. And they had the articles before them as a template, as you were, what to keep, what to change. The word perpetual never appears anywhere in the
Right.
Constitution. In
Right.
fact, if you look in the Constitution very closely, you'll find that nowhere in that Constitution is the federal government given any power to determine if or by what manner a state may leave the compact. The issue of, well, if a state doesn't obey certain federal regulations, can we use military force against it? That was brought up in the convention and voted down, so that was not in
Yeah.
the Constitution. But
Exactly.
nowhere in the Constitution is a state restricted or prohibited from secession, just
Hmm.
as nowhere in there was the federal government delegated any power to determine anything about secession. So I
Exactly.
use those words delegated and prohibited very selectly. because if you read Amendment 10 to the Constitution, it says that the states or the people retain all rights that are not prohibited by the Constitution, and the federal government only has those, I'm sorry, not rights, but powers. But the federal government only has powers that were delegated from the states.
Exactly.
What that means
Sure.
to me is the decision was made. We're not going to talk about perpetual. This is a voluntary compact. And therefore, being voluntary, it is, in fact, a more perfect union because of its voluntary nature rather than being compulsory.
Absolutely. Well, sir, we got to take another commercial break. When we come back, I want to get your thoughts on what you're going to say on Saturday when we're honoring Sir Moses Ezekiel, whose birthday it is, and celebrating the fact that the monument is coming back. We'll be right back with retired General John Scales.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I rise in support of my amendment to the NDAA, which would simply block funds from being made available to the naming commission established by Congress just a few years ago. The intent of that commission was to try to rewrite our nation's history by changing the names of our famous military bases and forts, tearing down statues, and even putting blankets over monuments with names not deemed worthy of remembrance by some. What a tragedy. You only have to look just outside my district at the famous Monument Avenue in Richmond, Virginia, which has recently been just desecrated by the removal of once famous, beautiful monuments. This effort to remove statues and rename bases encourages an endless cycle of renaming institutions, buildings, and cities across the country under the destructive ruse of political wokeness. Historical sites are healthy environments to observe varied perspectives of historical events, engage diverse viewpoints, and inspire robust conversations as we remember our nation's history. We should protect American memorials to preserve and remember our history. It has been said that those who do not remember history are condemned to repeat it. I urge my colleagues to consider the precedent being set by this arbitrary effort to rewrite our nation's history. I urge my colleagues on both sides of the aisle to support this amendment to preserve our history and fight these reckless efforts to destroy our country, our founders, and our history. And I reserve.
Reserves for what?
Welcome back to the Rob Maness Show. And this weekend, Saturday, 2 p.m. Eastern, in Section 16 of Arlington National Cemetery, we will gather. I will be the MC at this ceremony. And my guest today will be one of the main speakers there to celebrate Sir Moses Ezekiel, the sculptors of the monument that Representative Bob Good was talking about there, and the reason why he was trying to defund the renaming commission, because they broke the law, in his opinion, and mine, and General Scales agrees too. We will gather and celebrate that birthday and the impending return of the monument. Thank you to President Trump and Secretary of War Hegseth. Uh, and folks, you're invited. There's a flyer with a QR code. You can let the folks that are organizing this know that you plan on attending, and you should. This is an all-American event. It's not a Southerner event or a Confederacy event. It's an all-American event because this monument was intended to show through its beauty and its elements the long struggle to reunify the country and reconcile brother to brother, father to son, family to family, which is how people fought, died, and were wounded in that war. And General Scales, uh, I think that right there, Congressman Good's speech there trying to defund the naming commission said it all for me. That they violated the law that was passed to establish it, and do you know what part of what the law said that they violated it with?
Yeah, well, the law listed um, a bunch of things that, and by the way, this law, let me start on the law. The law arose from Senator Warren of Massachusetts, looking for an issue, I assume, but she seized upon the uh, the video that actually was put together by PragerU, starring a West Point professor
Mhm.
who went on and on, moaning about the Confederacy. And quite frankly, I would love to debate him one on one, because even though he was a history professor, his background is was World War One. That's what he did his research on, and
Mhm.
I suspect he knows very little about more than the superficial stuff about the Civil War. But at any rate, I think she seized on that, got it jammed through, made it part of the must-pass national defense authorization.
Mhm.
But the thing is, in that language, it specifically excluded removing anything that was a grave mark. And this monument in specific in Arlington was Sir Moses Ezekiel's grave marker.
Mhm.
Okay. That was what he thought was his best sculpture. And he requested, I wish to be buried at the foot of that marker. Okay.
Mhm.
So that's what I think that they're violating. Now, various courts have not necessarily addressed that properly. As one might imagine, in the local DC area, the courts are not exactly um, sympathetic to arguments against the Senator Warren position, I should say, I guess is the best way
Mhm.
to say it.
Yeah.
But you had asked earlier what I plan to say. I'm not going to discuss all my remarks, although they will be brief. But I think one thing is particularly relevant. You see, this is not the first time that cemetery markers and decorations has come up and been controversial, so to speak.
Mhm.
This occurred in California when many of the veterans on both sides were still alive, and there was a California assemblyman made a big name splash for himself, big speech about how we cannot, even though many Confederate veterans had settled in California after the war, we can't allow them to have markers or anything like that that even mentioned the Confederacy. It was just being very derogatory. Well, there was a very famous Union veteran. This veteran was named Ambrose Bierce. He was famous because he was probably the most acclaimed writer and journalist of that particular time. That is, the last decade of
Mhm.
the 19th century and the first of the 20th. Ambrose Bierce had retired as a major from the Union Army. Actually, I guess he hadn't really retired because I don't think he got a pension out of it. He had been wounded desperately at Shiloh. He had fought against the Confederacy on a number of battlefields and written stories about it, fictional stories. He had fought through the Green Hell, Pickett's Mill, but he respected his opponents. And this is one of the things I'm going to quote. This was his reply, public reply in a larger poem. The brave respect the brave. The brave respect the dead. But you'd draw that ancient blade, the ass's jaw, and shake it over a hero's grave. And I think that more or less is kind of what's happening now. And I thought he chose the words very wisely. I will also talk about reconciliation as the purpose. Now, why do I say that? My great grandfather, not the one I talked about earlier, but another Confederate veteran, fought in the 4th Alabama, was wounded 4 times. 4th time he lost his right leg, but he was still alive until 1925. His son volunteered as a cavalry officer for the Spanish-American War. He could do that when his father was crippled and at home, because by that time, 1898, reconciliation had become a real thing. And my family, before the Civil War, after the Civil War, has served in the military. And reconciliation and making the nation united again is the reason that sort of thing became possible.
Oh, I have to agree, sir. I mean, it's the reason why I was able to serve over 3 decades in the Air Force myself, because my family has been serving in the military, including the Civil War, since the American Revolution on my dad's side, and without that reconciliation, that my own personal service probably would not have happened. I mean, we see during the 4 years of the Biden administration that generational service families like mine and yours, a lot of them withheld their children and grandchildren and advised them not to join the military. And that's why the recruiting goals, in my opinion, were in the tank. That combined with the lack of respect for their lives, when you see debacles happen, like what happened with the withdrawal from Afghanistan. When you combine those two things, the recruiting goes down.
Well, I agree. And I'll make a further observation. Yeah. When I went through Ranger School back in 1970, the instructors were almost uniformly, the NCO instructors were almost uniformly from Tennessee, Georgia, Alabama, places like that. And even to this day, in some of the elite Army formations, Rangers, Special Forces, various other units like that, you will find it's not a preponderance, a certainly disproportionate number of Southern soldiers, particularly the NCOs. And what we have been telling them the last 5 years is, we don't respect you. We don't respect your ancestors. We don't respect your heritage. And that means we don't respect you. And really, of course, it's gone back more than 5 years, but that's when the law was passed in 2020. But that's not exactly the way you want those sort of people to come in and support the nation when you denigrate them at the same time.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Glad you said that. I would never have graduated from EOD school as a young enlisted 17-year-old without the help of 3 Southern Marine Corps soldiers. I'm not going to insist to call them soldiers, but Marine riflemen. One of them was a black man from South Carolina a Cajun from Louisiana, and a Hispanic guy from Texas. And I owe them everything, as a matter of fact, because that was the foundation for any modicum of success that I had, and desire to want to continue to serve. Well, we got to take one more commercial break, sir. When we come back, I want to talk about Sir Moses Ezekiel a little bit, the statue itself, what we know about it, and what our expectations should be to its replacement back in Section 16. We'll be right back with retired General John Scales, United States Army.
You woke up with a sore throat and a low-grade fever. You know you are getting sick, so here's your choices. You can get sicker and miss work, try to see a doctor this week, or sit hours in a crowded waiting room at urgent care.
I have a smarter option for you. Open your medical emergency kit. Match your symptoms to doctor-recommended prescription in your booklet and take the right meds now and get well faster.
This is not a first aid kit. It's like having an urgent care in your home. It includes doctor-prescribed medications to treat over 39 medical issues like respiratory infections, strep throat, pneumonia, UTIs, and more.
No waiting to see the doctor and no standing in line at the pharmacy. It's right here.
Every home should have at least one medical emergency kit, and here's how to order.
Go to worldviewhealthcare.com. Your kit to treat dozens of common and serious illnesses is rushed to your door. worldviewhealthcare.com. That's worldviewhealthcare.com.
The emergency kit available at worldviewhealthcare.com. Make sure you don't have to go to urgent care. I got pneumonia. I didn't have to go. I took this last year. Stayed at home, went to bed.
Under the fancy, flowery language of, safe spaces or something like that, or spaces for affinity groups, we're really just reinstituting segregation. We're looking to subject white men largely to discrimination in the name of anti-racism. That's why this is so clearly and on its face not about reconciliation, but revenge. So it should come as no surprise that something like the Reconciliation Monument would be targeted. This is the purpose of this movement. But there's far too many people in the country walking around thinking this is about sympathy or sensitivity or empathy. It's not. And the sooner that you wake up, the less painful it will be when this all comes all too painfully obvious. When something like the Civil War happens, when we've gone through something like slavery, we do need the opportunity to come together as Americans. It is ultimately one of the hallmarks of Christianity. Forgiveness, reconciliation, not harboring anger, not looking back on life with regret, not erasing your past, but forgiving what's happened and bringing people back together.
Welcome back to the Rob Maness Show. It's Wednesday, and we're discussing the healing a wound, really. And that's the re-emplacement of the Reconciliation Memorial that Will Kane from Fox News was talking about there. That's one of the scary things. My guest today is retired General John Scales, who will be speaking, as will I, at the memorial ceremony and the celebration ceremony of the return of the monument to Arlington Cemetery in Section 16 this Saturday, 2 p.m. Eastern, along with Congressman John McGuire of Virginia, the representative of the McKinley family. I'll be reading a letter from. I've got a letter from Governor Youngkin, and we may even have some more distinguished visitors and a letter or two by the time we get there on Saturday. And General Scales, Will was talking about and surmising about, opining on what he thought was the real purpose of this whole monument thing. And you mentioned that West Point so-called history professor. I almost gag when I say that, sir. I'll be honest with you. I know I shouldn't be that way, but Kane mentioned a lot of the things like critical race theory, discrimination, segregation that we're seeing before our very eyes be reinstituted, and those divide. The old phrase, diversity, is our strength. Those are the reasons why it's not. It's our unity. That's the strength of especially the American Armed Forces, sir. And I think Moses Ezekiel recognized that, didn't he? That's why he did this monument, is that we need unity.
Well, I think so. Not only it's the formal title is, of course, the Confederate Monument, and he was trying to show the Confederacy. One of the reasons the monument is criticized now is it shows people whom the viewers believe were enslaved. Maybe they were, maybe they weren't. Who knows? But in stereotypical fashion. Okay, but you know, there are a lot of people that see things that way. But really, I think Sir Moses Ezekiel understood, as probably you do, and I certainly do, coming up in the South, that things are a lot more complex than anyone said. For instance, I told you earlier, my great-great-grandfather from the 41st Tennessee is buried in an unmarked grave. I did not mention at that time that he was 1/4 black. He was a poor man, and he volunteered to serve. He served as an infantryman, not as a wagoneer or anything like that, even though those are soldiers' jobs now. But the story is complex throughout. That the nation needs to have that unity. I think the old motto was "E pluribus unum," from many one. And that's the kind of nation we all aspire to be in. But there are people that don't see it that way, and they have caused us a lot of trouble. You mentioned the history professor. I don't know, but believe that brouhaha many years ago, about 5 or 6 years ago, where that cadet who on graduating showed his communist T-shirt and all that sort of thing. It's like, really? Really? You know, that academic atmosphere doesn't belong really anywhere in much less at a place like West Point. But anyway, Sir Moses Ezekiel was a cadet at the VMI, and he fought at Newmarket. And he fought alongside scions of the wealthiest. One of his classmates was the grandson of Thomas Jefferson. But he also fought alongside all the common soldiers, the poor, the people from all over. And he was a world traveler after that when he became a sculptor. And so and being Jewish, he obviously felt he was the first Jewish graduate. He felt perhaps a little bit on the outside, but he was accepted as a member of the Corps of Cadets and as a soldier. He found acceptance in the United States, just as most of the rest of us, I hope, do now, including those who are Jewish. So, anyway, that's the way I feel.
Yeah, and I think the monument, the seeds that it planted and supported, that the reunification and reconciliation that it was supporting, that was happening at the time, and that continues to happen to this day. If you look at it in the right context and the right perspective, those seeds should be able to make sure that every Jewish person gets the opportunities that every other person born in America gets, that every black person, every Hispanic person, every Asian person, every Native American person should have this. That's been the goal since the Declaration of Independence was penned and approved by the Continental Congress. And everything the country has done has attempted to create that and make us a more perfect union, as it says right in the Constitution, I believe.
And not merely not merely equal opportunity, but acceptance as the person that they are. That is the key. And that, unfortunately, I'm afraid some of our Jewish people now are not feeling that because of events that were not within their control either.
Mm-hmm.
We are all human beings in the United States from many different flavors. And that, the fact that we can come together as a nation is more important than where anyone came from or anything like that.
Yeah, and the seeds of division through Marxism, Islamism, from all these tens of thousands, millions of people that have been allowed to come here illegally are still being sown to try to destroy that unity. And monuments like this can help us shore that up, right?
I
Defeat that.
certainly hope so. Unfortunately, as we know, some people are going to take it and use the reconstruction of this monument to cause further controversy. We can expect that. Hopefully, we won't have to deal with screaming demonstrators for this particular portion of it, though.
Yeah. The Army controls the cemetery, and I'm sure they're going to be all over it. What do you expect of the ceremony itself, sir, before we get to the end of the show? I think it's going to be a beautiful day, probably on the cool side. And I hope a lot of people show up that have found out about this.
Well, I hope so too. And but this is on Sir Moses Ezekiel's birthday, and it is to celebrate him and his family as much as anything. Yeah. And I play a small part, as do several other people. But it's really about supporting them as well as all the rest of us who have family that are buried there.
Yeah, exactly right. Has his family been coming to the cemetery to celebrate him routinely?
I can't answer that. You'll have to ask one of them Saturday because I don't know. In fact, was unaware that I had a relative there until a few years ago.
That's amazing, sir. Well, yeah, I appreciate you coming on the show today to talk about this and get some factual truth out about the whole circumstances and the truth about the monument, about Sir Moses Ezekiel. And I think we are going to have family members there from his family. I look forward to meeting them and meeting you also and celebrating this day and hopefully get our country on a better track to continue our effort to be reconciled to each other as human beings.
Yes, and thank you for inviting me, and I look forward to seeing you Saturday.
Thank you, sir. Good luck. I'll see you Saturday, folks. Saturday, 2 p.m., Section 16, Arlington National Cemetery, a celebration of Sir Moses Ezekiel's birthday, his life, his sculpture that is being reinstated by President Donald J. Trump and Secretary of War Pete Hegseth, and the Governor of Virginia, Governor Youngkin, will be celebrating the fact that it's coming back. But it's primarily about Mr. Ezekiel's memorial. I'll see you tomorrow. It's Truth Thursday. We're going to talk about the globalist plan to take down America and institute a one world government.